Warning, this review contains spoilers. I'm going to reveal the big mysteries behind the game and how it ends. So if you don't want to know that, then click away now. 3, 2, 1. In Night in the Woods, you play as a female cat called May. She dropped out of college due to reasons she won't say, and returns to her hometown to live with her parents. Once she's home again, then she reunites with old friends, talks with folks around town, and, in the end, realizes that some people have been going missing, and figures out why. As you play, you find out that she had a bad reputation in her hometown, because as a child, she beat another kid badly enough with a baseball bat that he had to be hospitalized. This violent incident also caused her parents to go into massive debt as they handled the aftermath of her attack. You also find out that she supposedly did this because of mental health issues. She had a dissociative episode, saw everything as merely dead shapes, merely lifeless matter, and that made her feel very angry. She simply let that anger get the best of her and attacked someone random. This trend of her being violent and bratty continues onward throughout her life. You find out about her past in bits and pieces as the story goes. What you learn depends on how you answer questions, though. You can learn that May ditched a girl who was like a sister to her and didn't even notice when that girl's mother died of cancer. You can learn that May accidentally bloodied, choked, and puked on her prom date and then blamed him for everything and even wrote a nasty song about him, and so on. When the game begins, she's now an ex-college sophomore and is 20 years old. She refuses to tell her parents why she dropped out and returned home. They try to be understanding and supportive despite her nastiness towards them and the fact that her tuition costs might cause them to lose their home since, after all, they were already in debt due to her actions. Her mother even suspects that renewed mental health issues might be a problem and that she might need additional mental health care. As a result, she suggests that May see a doctor, but May rudely brushes her off and insists that she's fine. She also has her parents do her laundry, wears her shoes in the house when they leave theirs by the door, and acts entitled in general. She doesn't help out and just wants to play and rage at the world like a sullen, angry, dumb kid, even though she's 20 years old. The game's writing tries to play May's behavior off as quirky, and even has NPCs note that she's still a good person. However, she didn't seem like a good person to me. On top of being whining and mean to her parents, she's also rather thoughtless towards others and shows little empathy or understanding. For example, the player can have her save some rats, and she calls them her rat babies. This is supposed to show that she has empathy for other beings. However, to feed them, the player can only repeatedly shoplift pretzels from a struggling small business owner. They're rats. She could have given them scraps from home or the garbage. After being fed, they multiply. They're everywhere, and when the obvious is stated that they will be poisoned, they will be exterminated, she defiantly ignores reality and, as such, doesn't really care about these rats. True kindness would have been either taking the initial 2 rats in as pets, or, more practically, catching and releasing them somewhere better than where they were. Stealing from others and then blowing off that her babies will likely die didn't seem loving. Instead, it just seemed as if she enjoyed shoplifting and used the rats as an excuse to sort of roleplay that she was going through something more noble than she was. She shows some kindness to her friends, but even then, not much, and she's still mean in general. For instance, with Bae, she suggests going to the mall. She has Bae drive her with no consideration for gas money, despite Bae being broke and struggling. Then, despite how much it stresses her friend out, she asks Bae to cover her while she shoplifts something she doesn't need and even states that she never intends to use. She simply enjoys stealing for the thrill of it. This also seems to underline that she wasn't stealing for the rat's sake either. After shoplifting, she wants Bae to buy her dinner, which of course would cost Bae even more money. As they're eating at the food court, Bae becomes even sadder. To cheer her up, the player has to make May climb an art installation and spray random, innocent folks with water from a disused fountain. The water is described as being gross, too, meaning it's probably stagnant and nasty, which would ruin the sprayed people's day, all to make Bae's day just a tiny bit better. This sort of thoughtless behavior from May is typical, too. Even when it it comes to her past actions, then she's self-absorbed instead of reflective or remorseful. For instance, whenever the traumatic injury she caused that other child is addressed in the game, then she only thinks about how the incident affected her. It's not even revealed if he sustained any long-term injuries or not, which he very well might have, since she was bludgeoning him with a baseball bat badly enough to send him to the hospital. Instead of elaborating on what happened to him, or perhaps any sort of remorseful feelings, the player only gets to hear about how May's annoyed at being stigmatized for it and how unfair that is to her. Similarly, with her prom date, even as an adult, she continues to blame him for her actions at their prom. She wants to avoid him, she's all sullen and angry at him, and then at the party, she gets drunk, rants at him, threatens to hurt him, and tries to be the center of attention as she does all of this too. And all of it is demanded by the plot. You're railroaded. You can't advance it any other way than by making May act like this. Worse yet, May isn't just unlikable because of all of this. This PC is supposed to be a 20-year-old ex-college sophomore, yet her dialogue often reminds me of that old Katie, the Penguin of Doom copy pasta. The copy pasta is from 2006. It's just a little satiric imitation of how teenagers would often try to seem so random to get attention and would wind up just seeming cringy instead. After all, people can be random and kids can be silly, but trying to seem oh so random rings as horribly false and desperate. And that's May's dialogue, over and over and over again. It's irritating and poorly written. Similarly, she was told to keep a journal for her mental health, and as the stories played through, the pages fill up with her drawings and notes, but these also look as if they were written by a child. All of this is very relevant because May interacting with others is the main feature of the game. Her being an unlikable protagonist was unenjoyable for me. Hours of this wasn't fun. I kept playing because I wanted to know the reason behind what was going on in town, what the big secrets were, and the reason turned out to be disappointing. As the player continues through the game, May continues to have daytime playtime and disturbing dreams at night. Eventually, the cause of her madness/anger problems is discovered. Why people have been disappearing is also discovered, including what happened to her missing friend Casey. The answer? An eldritch-obsessed cult. People wanted to revitalize the town in a struggling economy, and to do so, they made human sacrifices to an eldritch being. May basically got semi-possessed by this eldritch being. This revelation bothered me because it undermined the entire theme of a person struggling with mental illness. Plus, May was already being constantly absolved of any self-responsibility. Her issues were always everybody else's problem, and she just wanted to goof off while taking advantage of others. She showed little desire for self-growth and, at best, was self-pitying and then reassured by others around her that she was a better person than she thought. There's no sense of self-awareness there or motivation, desire for growth within her, for change. Just complaining and blaming others and being fine with taking advantage of them. Giving her a supernatural cause for all of her problems and her anger made this far worse because it made her choices all seem hollow and further freed her as a character from any need to feel remorse or responsibility, since after all was said and done, her actions were being heavily influenced by a ridiculously powerful ancient entity that she couldn't combat and couldn't have really sought help for. All of the support in the world, the medicine, the therapy, no matter what she would have done, it would have been completely something that she couldn't have handled. So how can you blame her when she's completely overpowered and making bad decisions left and right? How can you expect her to not take advantage of others, to not be beholden to a force that's completely beyond understanding? Even if this struggle is viewed through a lens of mental health and the eldritch being is supposed to be madness itself, then that still doesn't work because it portrays May as someone without any agency, which is demeaning to people who have mental health issues. It doesn't make her take advantage of others. It doesn't make her decide to have other people people do her laundry and Bay spend gas money on her and all this other stuff. The game's writing didn't just undermine its points on mental illness either. It constantly attempted to discuss serious subjects but failed to do it well. For instance, if greed and imbalance of power in society is a huge issue, then why target people who teach themselves to make apps and hate them for using their intelligence to code, create, and better their lives? Also, why assume that all of the people who make apps live in Silicon Valley? Tech-based corps, sure, and a lot of apps, but app makers are a huge crowd nowadays, from all over, and this game was made in 2017. Even Angry Birds is Finnish, for example. As I said, this is just one example of many, too. Here's another. If jobs are in high demand in this small town, then why would Bay's dad continue to employ someone who's a danger to his daughter? That doesn't make any sense if there are more workers available than there are jobs. By the way, Bay and the other NPCs weren't that likable either. The poor writing extends to them too. For example, at one point, when May and her friends are being chased by the cultists and they assume they're going to kill them, then May's friends all run off and leave her to die. As they wonder about her fate, one cooks, two play video games, and the third paces. That's it. Later on, when May comes over and she's not doing well at all, the two also don't want to stop playing their video game. Then, randomly, later on, May gets in trouble again by suddenly deciding to sacrifice herself in a weak redemption arc. And this time, they all rush off to save her, and one even brings a weapon. Their caring about their friend's well-being seems to switch on and off for the plot's sake. The gameplay. As I mentioned in the story section, this game is mostly just May wandering around and talking to NPCs. However, when May does speak with others, then the player's choices are extremely limited. Oftentimes, they're not even really choices. Check this irony out. Otherwise, the gameplay is random. There are some puzzles, however, some of the things that you find while wandering around mean nothing. These fireflies, these acorns, this yarn, none seem to do anything. As for the puzzles that do yield results, those results are often either small or irrelevant. You can tap these weather monitoring stations, but it turns out that they just release little notes, and that allows for a few extra lines of dialogue with the NPC Angus. That's it. You can find all 3 pentagrams, but that does nothing. Worse yet, you could waste your time looking all over the map for the 3rd pentagram, because it's auto-found later on when the characters are advancing into an old mine. And sometimes these puzzles are just dumb, such as this buzzer puzzle. The solution is to electrocute May. I thought that maybe I could at least jam an acorn in there, since an acorn's cap kind of looks like a button. And that was the only movable possible item that I'd found. I'm used to semi-logical solutions in point-and-click adventure games, and expected something similar here, but no. She just tested jam her paw into the sparking hole. Not only was that a dumb solution to the puzzle, but it also made her seem dumb as a 20-year-old character. There's also just one ending to the story. It varies depending on which characters you choose to have May hang out with, but overall, it's always the same. You'll just learn more details about different NPCs and different details about May. There are also a few mini-games during the game. May plays bass guitar, and so there's a Guitar Hero-like rhythm mini-game. It's fine, but a dead end. You don't get anything for playing well or poorly other than a few different lines of dialogue. You can play with her friends, or you can play twice a day in her bedroom. And there's an old retro-style game that can be defeated too. It's a game within a game, and it's okay. If you do play it, then I recommend editing the key bindings beforehand. I found the standard setup to be awkward. Making the N key my attack button felt much more natural. It also made gameplay much smoother, but whether or not you take the time to beat it doesn't really matter either. It has a happy ending and a bad ending, but the minigame is isolated from the main story. May does get asked if she likes the game itself, but that's it. I got bored with it after a while and stopped playing it. On a funny side note though, it turns out that you have to be careful here, because there's a dude who has to live in order to get the good ending for the minigame. I didn't know this when I played, but I could tell that this guy looked different from the rest of the monsters. I assumed that he might be an NPC and that I could hit the interact button to talk to him. But the interact button is also the attack back button. I think that this was poor game design, but I thought that it was funny because it reminded me of a scene from Community.
We're fighting for friendship, which means we can't lose, okay?
Okay.
Okay! I guess there's no hug button.
There's also a little hot or cold star finding minigame, a water balloon toss, a wheel spin, and I think that's pretty much it for the minigames, but these other little minigames are rather forgettable and there's nothing particularly rewarding in them either. The look and the sound. I think that the graphics are decent. I appreciated the attention to detail, such as when May's feet kicked up dirt and twigs while running in the dirt, but not when she was running on the pavement. The art style is also unique, colorful, and pleasant to look at. The soundtrack seemed fine to me, but I didn't enjoy any of the tracks in particular, and some sounded annoying to me. The music did add to the game overall though, but in an atmospheric sort of way. It's also a long soundtrack for a short game. The soundtrack's almost 3 hours and 22 minutes long, and it has a huge number of tracks. Some of the tracks are maybe 10 seconds long, others several minutes long, but there are many of them. The total is 128. Final thoughts. It can take anywhere from 9 to 22 hours to beat, depending on how much you want to do in the game, but most of what you can do has no bearing on anything. For instance, with the pentagram puzzle, finding all 3 does nothing because the quest givers are supposedly just teenagers. The idea is, haha, you took that seriously? Yet supernatural stuff is in the game. Laughing off one wild point while validating other wild ones is weak. The idea that the teenagers could be influenced by some being also seems plausible when the protagonist herself is being influenced by one. The pentagrams doing nothing seems rather lame as a result. There are many moments such as this in the game too. The writing was weak. Meanwhile, the protagonist was poor and seemed to be trying way too hard to seem like a zany child when she was supposed to be a 20-year-old. The supporting characters weren't strongly written either. Then on top of all of that, its intended messages and themes were often poorly written too. For example, a big theme was the crushing struggle of small towns in a bad economy, the dullness of being in a rural area, and so on, but I didn't get that feeling or sense while playing. After all, there's a great library, but few use it. There are places with parties a couple of hours away. There's hunting, and given that there's some huge river nearby which can even flood the town, there's likely fishing nearby too. There aren't many jobs in Possum Springs, and that obviously sucked, but the game did a poor job of conveying strong emotion about that, especially since its protagonist is a self-absorbed wacky wacko. Overall, its plot just seemed poor, attempting to be both serious and zany at once in a way that didn't mix well, with a weak protagonist, weak supporting characters, and repetitive, mediocre gameplay that wasn't fun and usually didn't even matter for the story.